The moment I walked into that courtroom, my ex-husband smiled at me. He thought he had already won. He had spent months building his case, collecting evidence, waiting for me to make a mistake. What he didn't know was that I had spent those same months building mine. And everything he thought would destroy me? It destroyed him instead. Daniel and I were married for 11 years. We had 2 kids, Mia, who is 10, and Jake, who is 7. We built a life together, the way you do when you're young and hopeful, and genuinely believe that the person you chose is who they say they are. The divorce was his idea. He said he'd been unhappy for years. He said I was too emotional, too dependent, too much. He had a list of things wrong with me that he recited so smoothly, it was clear he'd been preparing it for a long time. I didn't fight it. I was too exhausted to fight it. The custody agreement gave me primary custody. Daniel got 2 weekends a month plus extra time during holidays. He said it wasn't enough. He'd been saying it wasn't enough since the day we signed the papers. I told myself he just missed the kids. I was wrong about that too. Last fall, I started dating again. I know, a year after a divorce, 2 kids, full-time job. My friends said I was brave. Some days I believed them. I met someone through a mutual friend, a man named Greg. He seemed kind. He asked good questions. We texted for a few weeks and agreed to meet for dinner on a Saturday evening. Daniel had the kids that weekend. I got dressed up for the first time in a long time. I drove to the restaurant. I waited. Greg never showed up. He didn't text, he didn't call, he just didn't come. I sat at that table for 40 minutes before I accepted what had happened. Then I drove home, changed into my pajamas, and fell apart in a way I hadn't allowed myself to in a very long time. It wasn't just about Greg, it was about everything. The divorce, the loneliness, the year of holding it together for the kids while quietly coming undone on the inside. I called Daniel. I know that sounds strange, but the kids were with him, and I needed to hear their voices. I asked if I could talk to them. He let me. And then, in a moment of weakness I would come to regret, I asked if he would bring them home early, just for the rest of the weekend. I missed them and I was struggling and I just wanted my children. He said no. He reminded me it was his time. He told me I was being manipulative. He said the kids didn't need to be dragged into my emotional instability. I hung up and sent him several messages I shouldn't have sent. Angry messages, hurt messages, messages that said things I meant but shouldn't have put in writing. By Sunday, I had calmed down. By Monday, I had moved on. I didn't know he was saving every single one. 3 weeks later, my lawyer called. Daniel had filed for a modification of the custody agreement. He was requesting primary custody, citing, among other things, my emotional instability, my inability to prioritize the children's needs, and a pattern of manipulative behavior. As evidence, he submitted the text messages from that Saturday night. I read them through his lawyer's filing and felt sick, not because they were lies. They weren't lies. But they had been taken completely out of context, stripped of everything that had led to them, presented as a snapshot of a person coming apart at the seams. I called my lawyer. She told me not to panic. She told me to think carefully about that night, every detail, everything that had led up to it. So I did. And the more I thought about it, the more something felt wrong. Greg, the mutual friend who had introduced us, the specific timing, a Saturday when Daniel had the kids, the way Greg had seemed so interested right up until he wasn't. I started asking questions. It took me 2 weeks to find out the truth. Greg and Daniel had gone to university together. They weren't close friends, not publicly, not on any social media, either of them maintained. But a friend of a friend remembered seeing them together at an event years ago. And when I dug a little further, I found a connection that Daniel had been very careful to keep quiet. Greg hadn't ghosted me because he wasn't interested. Greg had ghosted me because that was the plan. Get me alone on a Saturday night. Stand me up. Send me spiraling. Wait for me to do something Daniel could use. And I had done exactly what they'd counted on. I sat with that for a long time. The anger came slowly at first. Then all at once a clean, clear, white-hot anger that felt nothing like the messy grief of that Saturday night. This was different. This was sharp. This was useful. I walked into that hearing with everything. The connection between Greg and Daniel. The timeline. The text placed alongside the context that Daniel had deliberately withheld. A statement from the mutual friend who had made the introduction who, when she found out what had really happened, was furious enough to put it in writing. Daniel's lawyer tried to redirect, tried to bring it back to the text messages, to the emotional instability narrative he'd been building for months. My lawyer let him finish. Then she laid out what Daniel had done, methodically, clearly, without drama. The judge was very quiet for a long time afterward. Daniel did not get primary custody. Daniel's current visitation was reduced. And there was a note placed in the court record about the conduct that had led to that Saturday night conduct the judge described, in careful legal language, as deliberately provocative and manipulative. I didn't cry when we walked out. I thought I would, but I didn't. I called my mom from the car park and told her it was over. She cried. I listened to her cry and looked out the window at the gray November sky and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Solid. Like the ground under my feet was actually there. I used to think that falling apart that Saturday was the worst thing I'd done since the divorce. Now I think it was the most human thing I'd done. He wanted me to be ashamed of it. He wanted me to believe it proved something about who I was, that I was unstable, unreliable, too much. What it actually proved was that I was a person, a tired, lonely, heartbroken person who missed her kids and had a moment she couldn't contain. He built an entire plan around that moment, and it destroyed him. I'm not the woman who sat alone in that restaurant anymore. I'm not the woman who sent those texts. I mean, I am her, technically, but I understand her now in a way I didn't then. And I don't think she deserves the things that were done to her. He thought he could use my worst day against me. What he didn't know was that it was also